Nothing cuts quite as deep as that double-edged sword of child stardom. I mean, oftentimes it turns dreams into reality, but it can also tear lives apart. So let's face today's query, shall we? Did Bewitched put a curse on its youngest star, Erin Murphy? Is Tabitha's magic still haunting her even today? And were the adults around her, the people in charge, making her uncomfortable on set? Finally, how many freaking Tabithas were there?
Hi there.
Welcome, I am your host, Nostalgic Nick. I'm here to uncover the truth about Erin Murphy's experience, including why her sister was suddenly dropped from playing Tabitha, and the rough and fiery challenges Erin faced in Hollywood. So if you're curious about these behind-the-scenes secrets, this one's for you. Thanks for being here. We had a ton of fun putting this one together. And we hope you rediscover some magic of the wonderful Bewitched. Let's go. Sister swap. Kids don't usually go to work in the morning, but in Hollywood, yeah, that's a thing. But as you can imagine, kids clocking in at the factory from 9 to 5 is pretty regulated even in the 1960s. And so, because of labor laws, especially for the youngins, anytime there was a baby, most sitcoms recruited twins. Hence, Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen. Maybe I should do a video on them next. Oh, and Lindsay and Sydney Greenbush, who together brought Carrie Ingalls to life. And so that brings us to today's specimen, Tabitha on Bewitched.
Tabitha, you twitched your nose.
Of course, we know that was Erin Murphy. But did you know she wasn't alone in playing the Bewitched baby? She also was a twin. Erin and her sister Diane did share the role of Tabitha. So why is Erin the one getting all the credit? Was this the perfect setup for inner family sabotage overshadowing a fall from grace? What? Well, in this case, actually no. You see, Erin and Diane are actually fraternal twins. And yeah, that means they weren't guaranteed to look identical. And sure enough, they didn't. Sure, they looked similar enough when they were really young, but as they got older, they began to look way too different to pass as the same person, even with magic sprinkled in. But they do share a birthday with Elizabeth Montgomery's real-life daughter, so that's kinda cool. And so they were fraternal twins and not one-to-one identicals. One had to go. And the one who stayed was Erin. But was that the lucky break that it sounds like, or did it doom her for good? Did this Tabitha dilemma drive a wedge between the sisters that would last forever?
We haven't got time to discuss it now.
This feels like the prime setup for a sibling rivalry. I mean, I know if my brother got picked to keep going with a role on TV and I got cut, I'd never forgive him. Even if that role was like Tattletale number 3 or Snot-Nose number 2, I don't care, people don't forget. But unlike the other sets that didn't give a hoot about their child actors, yeah, I'm looking at you, Wizard of Oz. Bewitched actually made sure the sisters had no reason for resentment, because Diane last appeared as Tabitha in season 5, but sharp-eyed viewers can actually keep seeing her just in different roles. I mean, yeah, that sounds like a decent compromise to keep her feeling involved, but what about after that? Well, like I said, we know the name Erin Murphy way more than Diane. I mean, what even is her last name? Oh, it's Murphy, that checks out. Anywho, turns out that's exactly how Diane prefers it. By age 13, she walked away from the entire acting business to just enjoy life and carve her own path.
What the? How did you do that?
Last we heard, life is good. She's got an adorable cat named Sugar, who is super sweet. And she works for a medical device firm in Santa Barbara. I don't know what that means, but Santa Barbara. Definitely not a bad setup, and nice to hear that. In this way at least, Bewitched did not ruin the relationship between two Tabithas. Love poison. Being one of the few child actors on an all-adult set could get pretty lonely, and it didn't help that tension was boiling just underneath the surface. I don't think love triangle quite does it justice. This was a love square, a polygon, a complicated knot. It's a mess. You see, Elizabeth Montgomery and Bill Asher hopped into Bewitched as a couple. The family that films together stays together, am I right? Well no, not this time. While we were laughing at Darren growing elephant ears, Elizabeth and Asher's relationship was falling apart behind the scenes, and eventually they split up.
I think I can take care of that.
And And one of Elizabeth's conditions for continuing Bewitched was Asher getting fired. That's right, folks, she wanted custody of the show in the divorce. But on top of that, Dick York had a pretty obvious crush on her. Open secret feels like an understatement. In fact, he was so obvious Erin Murphy knew clear as day, and she was a kid. We know from celebrity breakups, and sometimes from our own lives, divorces can get messy, and they have a blast radius of at least 5 miles. And Erin, well, she was right on the front lines as the proverbial child of divorce. So, how did the adults in her life handle this messy love and loss around the child? Well, actually surprisingly well. Erin called Elizabeth and York, quote, consummate professionals, which I think is pretty much the highest standard anyone ought to aim for. And on top of that, she even felt like York's crush on Montgomery made things even better. Because, well, hey, Darren really does love Samantha. Talk about method acting. Of course, Elizabeth's peace of mind is super important in this setup, but as Erin said, it seems like they always knew how to behave maturely.
I feel like a 16-year-old.
Now, what about Montgomery splitting from a showrunner who could call most of the shots? Well, apparently, even if it was messy, there was at least some professionalism in there, and here's why I think so. In an interview later in life, Erin once said that in real life, Elizabeth was more like cousin Serena than Samantha, which is apparently a verdict she got from Asher himself. Serena was the open-minded hippie witch. And I don't see too much negative with that comparison. If anything, through the nasty split, he still saw Elizabeth as someone with good values who cared about others.
No, Tabitha, that doesn't belong to you, no.
Just compare that to the stuff that my friend's parents said when they split up. I mean, boy oh boy, that was a bloodbath. I'm just glad there wasn't any of that mess for Erin. Technical difficulties. Bewitched was a pretty big deal in a lot of ways, from its pretty revolutionary pro-women themes, its way of indirectly tackling some relatable issues, and for its ambitious magic tricks. I'm talking about the ones that Samantha casts, and the special effects that made it look as real as possible. Little Erin Murphy chatted with the folks over at Closer Weekly, and it was very important to make clear, this was way before the CGI days. No motion capture, no fancy VFX to edit stuff in. Their team had to think really creatively with a much smaller toolbox, which also meant that the actors had to do a huge part in making all of that remotely possible. According to Erin, they had something like a green screen right at the start of that even being a thing, but nothing computer generated. Instead, it was all wires, strings, clever camera angles. You know, tricks and cuts. The actors had to work around some really intense needs to pull off all this magic.
Oh, here, honey. Excuse me, Ho-Ho.
You know, stuff like if something freezes or disappears and reappears, there's a lot of pausing and resuming right where you were. Checking for continuity, waiting for the camera crew to get all the footage they need. I mean, there wasn't ever really just filming. I've dabbled with that sort of thing for other projects, and yeah, let me tell ya, even just 5 seconds of a scene can sometimes take an hour maybe to get everything. And that's with way more fancy toys to help. And so the actors just had to grin and bear it. Or wiggle their nose and bear it in this case. Thankfully for Erin, actually this was pretty much her first dive into acting. Bewitched set the standard for what normal was. In her interview, Erin said she just knew if she'd actually started on something like The Brady Bunch, jumping into Bewitched would have been a huge culture shock of way longer shots, and just a way harder adjustment to some pretty labor-intensive stuff. But once again, Erin avoided another potential pitfall becoming a child star in a very demanding magic show. But there was one more huge demand Bewitched would make of her, and that's the most heartbreaking one of all. Bidding farewell. For better or worse, TV actors can end up like a family with their co-stars. Dysfunctional, unrelated, chaotic, sometimes bickering. Or feuding, laughing, crying, fighting for the spotlight. You know, maybe a typical family, actually.
Just what I mean. We agreed not to have any witchcraft around here.
Hey, my brother and I had a rivalry going on that would have made Sophia Loren and Jane Mansfield look like best friends. But with all that getting on each other's nerves and having to live with each other, if you're lucky, there is a wacky, confusing, and unbreakable love there too. And so, who did Erin Murphy form a bond with? Did nobody bridge a gap with the young star? And if they did, at what cost? Turns out, just like Darren's love for Samantha was very real, the love between TV parents and child was also very real.
Tabitha is the most perfect child anyone could wish for.
Thank you, Mommy.
Once again, we've got a great testimony from Erin, who called Montgomery and York wonderful people, and she wanted it known that, quote, they loved kids. But wait, it gets better. To quote Erin herself talking about Elizabeth, she really was like a mom to me. I definitely think of her more like a family member than a coworker. But here's the even cooler part. She said, quote, we were friends outside of the set, and she had 3 children around my age, so we grew up together. So it was a close relationship for sure. Oh, and on top of being her on-set mom, they also had some sister energy between them.
No, it's not a funny pony. It's an elephant. Elephant.
Apparently Montgomery enjoyed some real immature jokes and had a really dirty sense of humor, which I think is funny, and it actually became a huge bonding point for the TV mom and daughter. When the big Darren switcheroo happened, well, Erin says she has fond, loving memories of York and Sargent. In fact, Erin considered both men so great they were her idols growing up. And then when she was older, Erin kept chatting with York on the phone and hung out with Sargent in person. But that meant Erin was front and center through York's battle with back pain and all of his medications to beat it. She actually ended up being a huge part of helping York march on. He once told her that when he needed a sitting break, Erin would sit on his lap and he'd tell her stories. York said that really helped him through the worst of the pain and the hardships. So Erin gave some help to York, and along the way, she got a grandma through Agnes Moorehead. This is so special because Erin's own grandparents didn't live anywhere close to California, so Agnes really filled in that gap. The same way Elizabeth became a mom because Erin's own parents weren't with her on set. And you know what? Agnes called Erin her granddaughter, and Erin called Agnes her grandmama. Well, if that's not the sweetest thing ever, I don't know what is. But the greater the love, the harder the parting. And with this, I gotta give huge props to the young Erin for some pretty great emotional maturity on her part. When York had to leave, it was after a really long battle that Erin saw clear as day because he was in so much pain. But she lost a father figure, you know? And when Erin talks about losing York from the set, she says that because she saw how hurt he was, she was better able to understand that he needed to go, that his health really needed his full attention. That made it way easier for the young kid to lose a friend and a dad to say goodbye for, who knows how long. It was kind of forever. See, I think this is why adults have to remember that kids are way smarter than they give credit for. One door closes. Alright, Bewitched, you played things pretty cool at this point. But what about how you set Erin up for failure after Samantha cast her final spell? It's all well and good to give a kid a big role early on, but was this a one-hit wonder for Erin? Actually, yes and no, but mostly no. Again, we turn to Erin's own words, when asked if it was difficult for her to transition to her next phase after Bewitched, which had literally been all she knew growing up. Again, we have to give credit to the Bewitched set, as well as Erin's own mature handling of things, especially stardom and work ethic. She said that the aftermath was never too tough for her. In fact, she kept getting jobs after Bewitched. For one thing, she appeared in 100 commercials, on top of guest starring on some other shows like Lassie. What's that, Lassie? Erin also had a pretty normal high school life, became prom queen, and took on a lot of jobs behind the camera. Wow, that's great news, Lassie. Good pup. Yep, the half-civilian, half-star lifestyle was pretty calm for Erin Murphy, and most importantly, it was healthy. She attended classes, did some swimsuit modeling. Instead of appearing on the Waltons, she opted for Girl Scout camp. And then when she did hop back into the business, it wasn't just acting, it was makeup, costuming, and even casting. She's even been a stunt double. But Erin didn't feel the need to cling to Hollywood like her life depended on it. She also gets a ton of work as a motivational speaker and used her experience to be an acting teacher as well. Imagine getting taught the magic of imagination by the Tabitha Stevens. Can you say a dream come true? Again, it comes down to Erin being pretty much aware of what Hollywood can be, a hot mess. She knew timing was everything. When talking about her steady transition from Bewitched and beyond, she said, quote, "I think a lot of it is in some ways I walked away from the business before maybe the business kicked me out." Another pretty revealing quote is this: "I was one of those kid actors who always had a strong sense of self and self-confidence. I don't put that much stock in needing approval from other people, but at the same time I've always gotten approval from other people, so I don't know." And so, this quick escape from Hollywood, does this mean that Bewitched is a page of her life story that Erin wants to turn and never look back on ever again?
Oh, no, you mustn't do that.
They did it.
Is the story about a friendly witch actually a ghoul that haunts her legacy to this very day? Forever Tabitha. The cousin of typecasting is just plain always getting called one single character. Like some Star Wars actors that want you to just drop the whole franchise, as if. But hey, some actors have a huge history and they want to be known by a bit more than that one role that one time, and fair enough. And yeah, Erin has definitely dealt with that. During that big interview, Erin was asked how it feels that people still talk about Bewitched and still associate her with Tabitha, and pretty much nothing else. Well, again, it all comes back to how familiar it all was for Erin and how normal it was, thank God. That it wasn't just a really sad routine you just gotta endure. So no, it is not weird for people to talk about her from a show from childhood.
Did you stay in touch with everybody?
Her reason is this: it's been my entire life, so I don't know anything else. I was on a show when I was a baby to a young child, and people have always wanted to talk about it. So it doesn't seem weird at all. It just seems normal. Bewitched had every opportunity to make Erin's life awful during filming and way after. We've seen it more times than not. Case in point, Shirley Temple and Judy Garland. And we have covered both of their hardships in separate videos, so check those out next. But when Erin Murphy joined the cast of Bewitched, she also joined a family. The Stevens, the Montgomerys, the Yorks, the Sargents, the Moorheads, and so many more. And while they all had plenty of their own problems Erin was just as aware of as any kid in a bit of dysfunctional household, they also pulled it together when it counted most. For the young kid trusting the adults in the room to have her best interest at heart, it gave her an experience that makes it easy to look back on and say this: when I think about Bewitched, I really just think about how lucky I was. I really feel kind of honored to have been on a show that people love so much. I'll be honest here, it's scary researching the lives of child stars. We've heard so many horror stories, it's easy to assume the worst. And it stinks when those worries are usually spot on. But hey, we've got to give Erin Murphy a ton of credit, whose experience filming Bewitched proves that magic can still exist, even without a spell book, a cauldron, or a wizard's hat. And not only is her life today pretty darn good, she spends a lot of her time helping others, volunteering for charities, being a model to her own kids. Yeah, I know, Tabitha Stevens is a mom of her own, to 6 kids, mind you. And check this, she's also a grandmother. Yeah, time doesn't stop, and Erin Murphy just turned 60. So now is my favorite part, when we get to hear from you. So get down in the comments section and tell us, who is your favorite character from Bewitched? Who's your favorite child star of all time? Is there one that we should cover next? And finally, what's a great episode of Bewitched that you remember fondly?
You're not going to leave without your shoes.
Get down below and tell us all your memories. Because, after all, we here at Do You Remember are nothing without you, so thanks for being part of our community. If you enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, but most importantly, from my entire team here at Do You Remember, thanks so much for watching and have a wonderful, magical day.